degrees. And your next news update is at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Make sure to check out the Income Store live video stream of today's show right now at 560theanswer.com.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong. Well, you can understand why that ushered in such controversy. That's the tweet from Daryl Morey, the GM for the Houston Rockets, that spawned all sorts of recriminations from the Houston Rockets, from James Harden, their all-star standout player, from really all quarters of the NBA, because there are so many decades of work and billions of dollars at stake in China. China didn't take too kindly to the Houston Rockets standing in solidarity with the Hong Kong freedom fighters. And so they responded, prompting the star of powder turned Manchurian NBA commissioner Adam Silver to fully present himself in supine fashion to the Chinese and to the world.
Yeah, he's in Tokyo right now. The NBA has a game there, and he's trying to placate to the Chinese government.
I thought there was a lot of misunderstanding out there about our position. I thought we had been somewhat straightforward, but I can understand, given translations and given interpretations in different parts of the world, why there might have been some confusion. And essentially, what I've said in that statement is the long-held values of the NBA are to support freedom of expression, and certainly freedom of expression by members of the NBA community. And in this case, Daryl Morey, as the general manager of the Houston Rockets, enjoys that right as one of our employees. What I also tried to suggest is I understand that there are consequences from that exercise of, in essence, his freedom of speech.
Thanks for framing it for us, Adam. It's really helpful. Daryl Morey apologizing yesterday after the controversy ensued, genuflecting before, I think, James Harden, and apologizing for jeopardizing his $200 million Adidas shoe contract, probably. I did not intend my tweet to cause any offense to Rockets fans and friends of mine in China.
Friends of mine.
Are those friends of yours in China in gulags by any chance? I was merely voicing one thought based on one interpretation of one complicated event. Not that complicated. I have had a lot of opportunities since that tweet to hear and consider other perspectives. Sure.
What other? Okay.
The pro-communist, pro-detention camp perspective. Sure, yeah. Boy, I hadn't thought of it that way. I have always appreciated the significant support our Chinese fans and sponsors have provided, and I would hope that those who are upset will know that offending or misunderstanding them was not my intention. My tweets are my own, and no, I represent the Rockets or the NBA, blah, blah, blah. Not exactly Solzhenitsyn quality. Now, juxtapose the pronouncements from Silver and Morey's apology and Harden's "We Love China" tweet, please keep sending money, with stories like this. Concentration camp survivors. China using forced sterilization and abortion for genocide. So I guess I would ask Mr. Morey and Mr. Silver and Mr. Harden, maybe LeBron, all of these social justice warriors in shorts, except for Adam Silver, thank God.
Yeah, nobody wants to see that.
So should we also apologize for any Chinese communists that may be offended by Americans criticizing the Chinese for persecuting Muslim minorities in their country? What do you say to that? Remember, this is a league that's very socially conscious, thanks to the woke NBA commissioner. Pulled the All-Star game out of Charlotte in protest over the law that said men had to go to the bathroom in the men's room.
And you can't say owners because that invokes slavery. They're not NBA owners.
Mm-hmm.
What was their title? NBA?
Yeah, you got like governors, magistrates. I don't know. Come up with something other than owner, apparently, because it's so easy to confuse the NBA with a slave plantation. For more on this topic, as well as another geopolitical matter, that, of course, Syria, Turkey, and the Kurds, we're pleased to be joined by Tom Rogan, foreign policy and national security commentator and writer for Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Tom, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
What about the response, what it tells us about where we are in this culture? And by the way, one of the big cultural influencers, NBA, professional sports, that one general manager sending out one tweet in advance of freedom the world over becomes tricky and complicated.
Well, I think, the first thing to say is that you see these individuals. King James becomes the jester, and the owners show themselves, or the governors show themselves for what they are, which is ultimately people who care far more about their ability to make money from a regime that is deeply oppressive than they do about a sport that ultimately is defined by, or was birthed by, the choice of camaraderie rather than the communist model of forced enjoyment under a authoritarian flag. So it's a very sad choice. And I also think that it's important to note here that it is not as if some of the pushback against Daryl Morey's tweet is being framed as an example that he insulted the Chinese people on the mainland. Well, yes, some people on the Chinese mainland will be insulted, but a lot of people on the Chinese mainland either do not know about what's happening in Hong Kong because the Chinese government has blocked all their avenues to know about it, or they have no ability to air their own views in the choice of more freedom, because to do so is to invite a prison sentence. So it's sad and morally pathetic, but it is defined by people simply putting money above those values.
And you say that it's all about the dollar signs. Can you elaborate?
Well, yes. I mean, the Chinese Tencent, which is essentially a big media provider in China, has a very significant contract, multi-billion, multi-year contract with the NBA to air games, and those owners want their piece of the pie on that, and so they're willing to salute or to kneel to the throne. It also it's not just about Hong Kong. It's about that China, under Xi Jinping, the current leader, is a new Cold War adversary. They're doing what the Japanese did in the 1930s, 1920s as well, with the Pacific Islands, trying to seize those waters, vast amounts of trade. They're trying to steal proprietary technology. They are stealing vast amounts of information about American citizens so they could blackmail them if possible, which is the OPM Act. There is a trend here of aggression on the part of China that should be paid attention to. In the NBA's defense, this is the same reason that Top Gun Maverick, the upcoming Top Gun film, they removed the Taiwanese flag from Tom Cruise's flight jacket, the cruise patch on his flight jacket, because they didn't want to upset Tencent. So the Chinese really have made significant. Give the Chinese credit; they own a lot of what should be our most creative and successful citizens.
And some of our most powerful and successful companies, or at least they're wildly influential, right? The big tech companies like Twitter that did China's bidding, the Chinese Communist bidding, at the outset of the Hong Kong protests, just to provide one example.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it's fortunate that there has been greater pressure put on, greater legislation put on, especially technology companies, to withdraw from some of the activities they've been engaged in China. But yeah, I mean, look, I know that some listeners will probably be saying, listen, the responsibility of a corporation is to deliver a profit to its shareholders, and there's a clear argument for that in a civil society. But I think when you are dealing with a regime as despicable as the Chinese regime, as structurally despicable as well. Again, you mentioned, in your monologue, the Uyghur concentration camps, 1 million people, perhaps 2 million people put into camps simply on the basis of their faith. This is not a regime that has any regard for what the NBA is trying to say, which is that, Chinese citizens are given the right to happiness. Chinese citizens are given the right to happiness defined solely under the banner of the party, under the unitary state, of one-party state.
Well, in addition to that, it would be perhaps more tolerable if they were being honest about, look, we're going to do business where we can export our product and provide return for shareholders and provide opportunities for our players. That's what we're in business to do. But instead, you get all of this bull jive from Adam Silver and some of the players as well about their values, and this is our the sort of the moralizing defense of the indefensible because they can't be honest.
Yes, and not, Joe Tsai as well making comments about this. I mean, they're all lining up to be pathetic on this. And, again, they try and frame it as, a value set, but it's antithetical to what should be the most basic values that, we should hold dear to.
I want to turn to the other issue we wanted to discuss with you, and that's, of course, the president's decision to withdraw American presence in northeast Syria and cede that territory to the Turks and let the Turks and Kurds essentially fight it out. And whether or not this is sort of an instance of President Trump drawing a red line and erasing it the way President Obama did in Syria.
Well, I think that's exactly what he has done. I mean, he's already done that, though, in two areas this year. I think, and I pointed this out in one of my pieces yesterday, that if you look at his threat to impose an oil embargo on Cuba unless it pulled out of Venezuela, intelligence officers from Venezuela, that hasn't happened. He said that had to be done immediately. And then Bashar al-Assad in May launched another chemical weapons attack, and we've seen complete silence from the Trump administration about that. They enforced the first two times that he used chemical weapons, and it was verified with airstrikes. But they've decided to forget about this one. So I don't know whether President Trump is trying to be more like President Obama as he goes into 2020, or that he's not paying attention to what he said. But again, the real issue with Syria is the Kurdish forces there. The Turkish have legitimate complaints about a terrorist group, the PKK. The United States was cooperating with them quite actively in some ways to deal with that group. But Erdogan wants to spill Kurdish blood because that serves him both in terms of the standing ability of what he sees as the grand vision of the Turkish state to destroy its peripheral enemies, but also to mobilize a political base that has been weakened. And that political base is defined by a variation of Islamic ultranationalism. So when President Trump says, you can't go in there and slaughter them, don't think you can do that because I'm going to put sanctions on, it's a joke. Because once Erdogan is in there, he ain't going to be pulling out. It will become the banner cry for his regime. And were America to put on sanctions, he would have even more political necessity not to back out because, quite frankly, how unpopular the United States is with his political base.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any idea why President Trump would allow this? I mean, he owns 2 Trump hotels in Istanbul. That's I don't know if that plays a part in this or what.
Well, I don't think so. I think sometimes we underuse the business side of things with him. I think he truly thinks this is. I think he doesn't pay enough in his attention in his intelligence briefing, so he doesn't know the issues well enough. And I think he's. I mean, in my opinion, apart from the tariffs, which is kind of stupid, broadly on China, he's very good in terms of the national security stuff. So I give him credit for that. But on Syria, I think he sees it as too complicated, too tedious, and an example of, endless wars, even though it is not, that military footprint there was not an endless war. It was a peacekeeping presence in the vein of that which we saw in Germany in the Cold War, in Japan, the structural presence of American forces around the world. So I don't know what his thought process beyond him thinking this will be a vote winner for him. Perhaps it will, but if it is, it's not a good vote winner.
He is Tom Rogan, foreign policy and national security commentarian for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. We'll tweet out his pieces on both the NBA and Trump and Turkey. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it, as always.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Message and data rates may apply.
Guys, got hair loss? I know what you're thinking.
Should I shave my head, comb it over, wear a hat? Just stop. This isn't 1960.